Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Today I'm going to talk about another bookmarklet. So if you saw the hacks, the web bookmarklet, that one was pretty neat. This bookmarklet, I think, is kind of a game changer, at least as far as people's perception. It might actually be really useful in general to get people onboarded to web components more generally. So resize the browser, resize my code editor there real quick. So what it is, it's called 2-element. You can search for 2-element on webcomponents.org. Got it published there. It's out on NPM. They mess with it, but effectively what it does, if I hit the demo button here, and it runs a demo, there we go. You look at the demo, you're like, I don't know, what do I care? Well, refresh the page. And if you see, it just downloaded something. You go, well, that's kind of strange. Now, what it downloaded, though, is that code sitting on that page is taking a snapshot of what is listed there, which is not a web component, and it is generating something that is a valid web component that basically scrapes the styles and HTML structure of what's there in order to deliver you that same thing. So now this is that section at the top of the page, but encapsulated as a web component. It's not intended to be, like a production-ready thing. It's intended to kind of help generate a conversation and say, oh, that is useful by itself, right? So, it's kind of a training tool, as well as to get all of the scaffold out of the way of, a web component, and just get at the fact that you could just use these for CSS and HTML encapsulation, and it'd be a very useful tool. So let's look at some of the ways we could use that. So this is the code that's running on that website. Effectively, 2-element gets pulled in. There's just some sample styles. There's this little block here, and then I wait 500 milliseconds and I say, hey, give me this element called nice, and run download new component. Pass in the element in question, which is found by ID as what, and what you're going to create is called cool new element. So that's what's going on in that demo. Now, I took that and I made it into a bookmarklet. It was actually kind of a pain in the butt, but I made it into a bookmarklet. I'm going to add it to the Hacks the Web documentation, but it's listed on the 2-element README. The next version, when it gets published to webcomponents.org, will have this listed in it. But effectively, it just takes all of that definition and compresses it down into a bookmarklet you can inject with some very minor workflow to it. So in order to test this, I'm going to mess with the things produced in WC Factory, in our mono repo rather. So I'm going to run yarn start so that I can start just fire up the 2-element documentation. And I know if I put in /demo, I'll get that little site, right? And it downloads. So that's the exact same code as before. So it's running off this file. I'm going to tell it not to just download things. And instead, we are going to kind of set in motion a place to just mess with things that we find via the bookmarklet. So I'm going to go to WordPress and WordPress.org. Maybe I find something visually on there I really like. Who knows? It could happen. So let's scroll down and let's say maybe it's this little area, right? This is kind of a component of sorts. Each of these little squares in some capacity is a component. And this bar, this is a nice little bar. So I'm going to I already have that code thrown into a scriptlet here. I call it Web Componentizer. So I'm going to hit Web Componentizer, and it's going to say, welcome to Hacks Element Creator. To get started, click on the thing you want to make a new element. Okay? And so then, if you saw the other video, it does have this little green outline. So this is kind of attempting to select, what it is I'm going to call this on. So let's do it on this SEO-friendly thing. I don't know what it'll do. So the first time you use this on the site, it'll say, you'll now be asked to name this element. Make sure the name has a hyphen in it. Okay, so this is part of the web component specification, custom element specification that is part of the web components thing. So what I have to do, I'll hit OK, and it'll say, hey, you got to name this element. So we want to think about semantically, what would that be? And it's like feature, right? So it'd be like feature square or something. I hit OK, and now it generated something. So I'll look in it, and what it did is it took exactly what the DOM was seeing for that section of the page, generated new IDs, and tried to encapsulate it. And so you see we've got this little SEO friendly thing. Now I don't honestly know what it's going to do about the, see it says font family dash icons, and so it's entirely possible that like that icon thing isn't going to be there. But let's snag another one too while we're at, because it doesn't stop running. So let's do this bar, and so this could be like some kind of call out section, or maybe like visual section break, right? It's kind of a heading, it's kind of got its own thing. So now we just snagged visual section break. Again, it puts all the code together, and you see this one, it would appear that they have, you know, some floats or something going on. So this isn't always going to work, you know, successfully, right? This section apparently is not actually, you know, containing these items like I thought it was. You see these live in something else, so I can click those. And let's call this the text area, or text overlay of some kind. Let's look in text overlay. And again, we'll see, we snag the styles. They love open sans, so do I, so that's cool. So this one got a lot more. Okay, there we go. So there's the heading, there's the container that it's in, right? So there's a good chance that that visual section break probably has some connotation of text overlay hierarchically inside of it. We'll mess around with it in a second to see if we can't do that. So a way I could manipulate this in order to get the two to work, but first we'll put it in just a play space. So I'm downloading those. Let's go into my downloads folder. So if I look through my downloads folder here, I'm looking for visual section break. Pull that out of there and delete it from disk. And what's it? Feature square. Okay, I'll pull that out of there too. We'll close that. Okay. So I'm going to take them, I'm going to move them into where our little 2-element demo is. So let's get rid of these because they're not in that place anymore. And, oh, I needed text overlay too, didn't I? Yeah, I wanted text overlay.js, which I'm moving around in the background off recording. There we go. There we go. Okay, so text overlay. All right, so I've got those 3 elements there. Now, if I wanted to use these elements that the scraper just generated, I do import, and I have to do a // It's kind of silly, but need to for Node. Feature square.js, and then we will generate the other ones, stubs, and we're going to do text overlay and visual section break.js. All right, so now I've imported those 3, and now in order to use them, again, these are just, you know, for silly purposes at the moment, I would do something like that. And then I would have text overlay, we do text overlay like that, and then I do feature square and feature square right there. So I'm going to hit save, go back to my, there we go, my 2-element area. This is the demo I've been working on. Hit refresh. And this is what we just snagged. So these are those 3 components. You'll see the text callout one maintained itself pretty well. There's no background image that was correctly snagged in the other one. And then the SEO friendly block, you'll see it's sitting there pretty well. There's no icon. So like this isn't flawless. I don't want to express that it is, but it is absolutely a really good way to go about maybe doing like rapid prototyping, so that maybe I could say like, well, that visual section, let's dig in visual section. If it just had a slot, and a slot means whatever goes inside of me, you put it here. So if it just had a slot tag like that, then we could take our text overlay content and we could put it inside of that visual section break. And let's take that feature square and we'll move it down the page so that you can actually all see it. And we could make a series of those feature squares. Okay, so we'll see how they lay out together. Hit refresh, and you'll see there's my my text now sitting inside of that little feature overlay. So like other than having the background image, I just replicated that design aspect in the same exact dimensions and everything pretty well. Again, it's not responsive, and that thing I just snagged was. So again, this is kind of like it's a useful teaching tool and exercise. I could go look here and inspect this now, and I have that exact item, and I can see, oh, well, feature square is a list item, right? So if I treated features or told feature square, hey, you probably should behave like a list item, right? I could get it to operate in the same way. Another thing that I think is really powerful with this is, so let's go to that feature square. This is stamping out IDs to make sure that the classes are very specific to what they are. But let's take this and let's say instead of a list, it's a span, because it's not a list technically, but we do want to show them in an order. But they wouldn't be useful in an order, right, unless we cleaned up this whole, like, whatever the text label thing is, right? So let's first look at this BR. This actually styles the line break and does a lot with the line break here. So I could say, I don't think it's really that important that a line break is open sans, but that is what it's snagged. Just take that out, and it's SEO friendly. But what we could do is this kicks out with something called, it's just a title property. So let's start to turn this into a web component to leverage that. And in Polymer, the syntax looks kind of like this. So we'd have title, which is going to tell the DOM when it prints this element, hey, take whatever the title is and put it here. Now I could also make the default SEO friendly. Let's save. And now when we go back here, hit refresh, we still get SEO friendly squares all over the place. Now let's go into the styling of this, and something else I could add, I probably should add this to the default, is I could do host, and this is working on the element itself in a web component. So host refers to this element. So I could do display inline flex. All right, hit refresh, and now we get all those stacked up next to each other. Let's, in our demo here, let's get rid of that visual break for a minute there. Now let's take these feature squares. Let's do title equals cool stuff, and we'll do paste. We'll leave that one blank like that. Innovative car dealership. Right. And so now we've got cool stuff, innovative car dealership, and because we're using Polymer to be able to stamp those properties into our template, I just started mocking up what WordPress.org had here for this little section. Now, granted, I don't have the icons. We could start to work towards that, right? And this is something that even for our team internally, like these are things that we can mess with to start to get a sense of, is that, like, if we had that section from another website, would that make a lot of sense here or not? So we can rapid prototype pretty darn quickly using this. I could wire this up to hacks, in almost no time. It's rather trivial. So let's try and steal something else. I mean, not steal, learn from, obviously. So let's say it was this bumper here. Call out area. Right, it's from whitehouse.gov that I could look at. All right, and so we can snag the structure of that, learn from this, or if it's, little text area on cnn.com. I'm just trying to illustrate this isn't really tied to like anything. So let's say it was the in case you missed it block, and this would be like the addiction headline. Trying to get you to clickbaity thing. That I can take the addiction headline now, and that I can put it into my site. So again, the element is on webcomponents.org. It's called toElement, and yeah, I hope it's a really useful way to learn more about how to just generate web components and try to think more about our designs in these actual componentized ways that could be repurposed elsewhere, as opposed to thinking in squares and things like that.